Let's talk about the other big story that's happened today. Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi has died along with the Iranian Foreign Minister Abdullahian when his helicopter crashed very close to the village of Tawil in northwest Iran. The Iranian president was on his way back from the border area with Azerbaijan, where he had inaugurated a dam project that was built in cooperation between the government in Tehran and the government in Azerbaijan. Images from the site showed that the aircraft had slammed into a mountain peak. The official cause of the crash has not been determined yet, but rescue teams have been battling blizzards and challenging terrain as well as inclement weather throughout the night, throughout the last 24 hours to try and reach the wreckage site. But once they reached there, once they discovered the crash site, there were no signs of life that were detected. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has offered his condolences to the Iranian people. Ebrahim Raisi was seen as a potential successor to the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Iran's Vice President, Mohammad Mokhber, has now been chosen to serve as the country's interim president or acting president until elections are held in about 2 months' time. This comes amid the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, as well as the tensions between Iran and Israel. Israel has, of course, openly accused Iran of being behind Hamas and the attacks that happened on the 7th of October. Both Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu have not given an official statement so far.
Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi and his foreign minister were killed in a helicopter crash on Sunday. The charred wreckage of the aircraft was found early on Monday after an overnight search. Raisi's death was confirmed by Iran's vice president on X and on state television. President Raisi, the foreign minister, and all the passengers in the helicopter were killed in the crash. Rescue teams fought blizzards and difficult terrain through the night to reach the crash site in East Azerbaijan province in the early hours of Monday. Raisi had been at the Azerbaijani border to inaugurate a joint dam project. There has been no official word yet on the cause of the crash. State TV halted regular programming on Sunday to show prayers for Raisi being held across the country. The 63-year-old was elected president in 2021. Since taking office, Raisi had ordered a tightening of morality laws, overseen a bloody crackdown on anti-government protests, and pushed hard in nuclear talks with world powers. Iran's dual political system is split between the clerical establishment and the government, and it is the supreme leader rather than the president who has the final say on all major policies. But for years, many have seen Raisi as a strong contender to succeed his 85-year-old mentor, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who has strongly endorsed Raisi's main policies.
I think a lot of people might celebrate or might be happy, but also a lot of people, I think, naturally would be very worried as to, the potential political stability and what it could have.
A contest to replace Raisi may already be in the works, according to Arash Azizi, an Iran political analyst at the Center for Middle East and Global Order.
We all expected a ferocious struggle for power to begin after Khamenei dies. It might have already begun with this incident.
The crash comes as Iran faces pressure over its nuclear program, its military ties to Russia, and its connections to Hamas, which is fighting Israel in Gaza. Countries, including China, expressed concern over Raisi, while the White House said U.S. President Joe Biden had been briefed on the situation.
All right, so this unfortunate and untimely demise of Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi, what does this mean for Iran's own domestic politics? There is a churn domestically within Iran and, of course, externally in its relations with Israel, with the United States, particularly this proxy war now coming out into the open between Tehran and Tel Aviv. What does this death at this juncture mean? Also, relations with India. Prime Minister Modi has condoled the death of the Iranian president. India had recently renewed the Chabahar project for another 10 years under renewed terms. What may this death mean for all of this? To try and make sense of this very, very sad accident is Mr. K.C. Singh. He is the former Indian ambassador to Iran. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. We'll take this one by one. First, as far as the timing of this death, this unfortunate accident, at a time when we're seeing domestic churn in Iran, there were protests by civil society against some of the repressive measures taken by the Raisi regime. There is also, I believe, at some point in the near future, some form of selection of who the next supreme leader is going to be. I believe Mr. Raisi was in contention for that as well. What does his death at this time mean for Iran domestically and its politics domestically?
Look, that's very true. We had been selected with great care because normally the presidential election has been handled by Iran very carefully. They allow some kind of a fair race between, although they shortlist the candidates, the Guardians Council does that, but after that they leave them alone. When in 1997 the president was elected, Mohammad Khatami was elected, he was not supposed to win. The conservative group really expected their person to win, but they allowed Khatami to become president. Though they didn't let him fully functional, but he was seen as a reformist and people came out in very large numbers. Now, when Mr. Raisi was elected 3 years ago, the outturn was very poor. Only about 49% people voted, whereas normally voting is over 65%. And almost 13% people protested by casting damaged ballots. They tore up their ballots or they, somehow spoiled them. And that number was larger than the votes that the opponents of Mr. Raisi had got. So that was a very Iranian way of protesting, that they were not happy. The choice was not adequate because those who were put up against Mr. Raisi really didn't have any stature. So this problem has been there. And then, of course, in 2022, when the women started protesting, we found that one young lady died in police custody. And women came out in very large numbers. So because of US sanctions and the Western sanctions, their economy has been suffering. Even though China has provided them an out because it buys their oil, it gives them a captive market. But nevertheless, people are not very happy. And this has been simmering below the surface. And that's why there were episodic incidents yesterday of fireworks in some places, not widespread, but off and on. It's very strange that the president of a country dies and you got fireworks in some odd places. Some people would have done it because they're scared to do it. But in that kind of a society, even to do it means there's a lot of pent-up anger and ire which is coming out. Now, coming to its domestic implications, yes, the supreme leader is in his late 80s. He's a cancer survivor. And therefore, it's a matter of time that he has to go. So he would have handpicked his successor. And it seemed like Mr. Raisi was also a member of what is called the Assembly of Experts. And that is the one that selects the next leader. So he was both a member there as well as the president. So he would have had some role to play when the next supreme leader was selected. Now, not only do they need a new president, but they also need to fill up that vacancy in the Assembly of Experts, which the supreme leader will have to do. And so this creates, I think, a churn within the political system. There wouldn't be that many people who are acceptable to the supreme leader, whom the clerics generally and the IRGC, they agree on as being loyal to their core principles, and they do not want a reformist. So it's a very critical juncture for Iran.
I want to ask about the external implications given this, the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel and Israel's response. Israel, of course, directly blaming Iran for it. We saw what happened in Damascus at the Iranian mission there. And then, of course, Iran's response to Israel with those drone attacks. Mr. Raisi's death at this time, even though there's no finger pointing, at least formally at Israel, what may this mean for the course of the war itself between Israel and Hamas and for regional dynamics in the Middle East itself?
Yes, we don't know what might emerge, although we know the weather was bad, it was foggy. But remember that Azerbaijan, where President Raisi had gone for a meeting, is quite close to Israel too. And that might have been one of the reasons Raisi had gone there, to wean them away. So the Israelis have invested a lot in their relationship with Azerbaijan. So theoretically, you could say that Iranians would definitely look at any tampering with the helicopter or anything else. We don't know. But I'm sure such an inquiry will be held. We don't know what's going to be the result. And that's why the oil price went up today. The general expectation was if any such finger pointing starts, then we can have that exchange which took place last time. Things had settled down when the Israelis killed their generals in Damascus and they fired hundreds of missiles and drones at Israel.
Yeah.
That may re-spark That is the implication. But as far as national security policy and foreign policy is concerned, the president plays a minimal role. It really is the supreme leader and his advisors and the Supreme National Security Council, which has a Secretary General. Notionally is chaired by the president, but the Secretary General runs it. And the Secretary General is very much there. I remember from my time, if you went to the Foreign Office, they'll give you round replies to questions. You'll not get clarity. But if you went to the National Security Council, you got very clear answers to the questions you posed. And that's normally in these societies a test to see how close are you to the final deciding point. Because the closer that person to the ultimate decision makers, the clearer he is and the better perspective he is willing to share. So to that extent, the president is, as far as national security, etc., is concerned, an important factor because he was close to the supreme leader.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they are one part of many advisors, and that will go on as long as the supreme leader is there. IRGC commanders are there. Those decisions will continue to be taken. They will not be much impacted.
I also want to ask you one final word on India and Iran and the role therein. The Prime Minister has condoled the death of the Iranian president. We've seen the Foreign Minister also put that out on Twitter. Just recently, India had renewed the Chabahar project under different terms for another 10 years. How may this death, if at all, have an impact on India-Iran ties?
Look, I think the relationship between India and Iran, it was the closest when I was there, till about 2003. I arrived there in 2003. 2001, Prime Minister Vajpayee had gone to Tehran. 2003, President Khatami had come to Delhi, and they were Delhi Declaration, Tehran Declaration. That was the time the Taliban was ruling in Kabul. And the two countries were brought together because we were with Ahmed Shah Massoud, the Northern Alliance commander, and we were opposed to the Pakistan role in Afghanistan. But 2003, as India started talking to Americans about the nuclear deal, the Iranian clandestine nuclear program came out in the open. When AQ Khan was uncovered, Libya came out, and that whole network was exposed. And so the sanctioning of Iran started. So the Iranians then felt that, look, they were signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. India was not even a signatory. Americans were treating India differently, and they were sanctioning them. Of course, they wouldn't accept that they had cheated. They had essentially started a clandestine program and not told the authorities, which they were supposed to tell. So from that time onwards, I think the relationship at best has been somewhat mutually suspicious as we move closer to the Americans. And that is particularly so now, when clearly you got China, Russia, Iran lined up on one side, where the Iranians are even supplying drones and ammunition and arms to Russia, while they are fighting Ukraine and the Western assistance to Ukraine. So we are essentially in two different camps. We try bridging it, and that's why we keep a line open to them. But the Iranians are smart. They also keep a line open to us. But essentially, strategically, there is not that much of convergence. And particularly when you take the cultivation of the president of UAE by the Prime Minister, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, these are all people in an entirely different, who are seen by the Iranians as in the American corner. And that is why the IMEC, when you signed the IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, on the sidelines of the G20 summit, there was the Israeli Prime Minister who was missing. And that was a question to be asked at point, because the Saudis were still not accepting the Abraham Accords. But that was the American scheme to isolate Iran and create a new geopolitical structure in the Middle East. But with Hamas, what Hamas has done, and obviously Iran is has had links with them, has trained them, given them money and arms. What Hamas did has completely upended that. And that is continuing. There is no question today. You can talk of IMEC. India keeps talking about it. But where is the IMEC going to go? Not with Israel the way it is. Saudis will not deal with them. Even Emiratis are being forced to sort of, at least in public, criticize Israel. So it's upended the whole thing the Americans were planning in the Middle East. And we are sort of caught more on the American side, more on the Emirati side, but we also keep a line open to Iran, and that will carry on the same way.
All right, Mr. K.C. Singh, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us and putting into context what the death of the Iranian president means domestically as well as in Iran's external relations, particularly in the region. It could lead to further churn. That's a